At 74, Mark Knopfler sold his guitars at auction for almost $9 million. Fans got excited and thought it might mean the band was coming back. They were wrong. For many years, people kept asking the same thing. Why won't Dire Straits get back together? It wasn't because of fights over music ideas or busy schedules. It was something much deeper, connected to 216 shows in 14 tough months, a broken relationship with his own brother, and a way of life that almost ruined him. In 2024, he finally told the surprising truth about what those huge stadium tours really cost him and why no amount of money could ever make him go back. Mark Knopfler was born on August 12, 1949 in Glasgow, a city that was still tired and damaged from the war. Food was still limited by rationing, and streets destroyed by bombs were still being fixed, even though World War II had ended 4 years earlier in 1945. His parents had gotten married in Newcastle in 1947 and then moved north, fitting 3 kids into a small apartment. Ruth was born in 1947, Mark in 1949, and David in 1952. Jobs were disappearing in Glasgow's shipyards, and people were getting more scared of outsiders. His dad was Hungarian and Jewish, already seen as different, and good jobs as an architect kept falling through. Money was short, and everyone felt stressed. When Mark was 7 in 1956, the family moved again. They left Scotland and went about 120 miles southeast to Blyth in Northumberland, a coal port by the North Sea. It was his mom's hometown, and they hoped her teaching job would keep the family going. The move felt quiet and dull. A big, tough city was swapped for a small working town. Without realizing it, Mark had crossed his first border, one that would shape how he looked at the world. Louisa Mary Knopfler came from Blyth, a place built on coal, ships, and hard daily routines. She trained to be a teacher and played piano, and she used both to keep the family going. After school, she would bring the kids around the piano and lead sing-alongs, even after tiring days of teaching. Often, her paycheck was what kept the home together. Blyth was just 10 miles north of Newcastle, close enough for Mark to see factories closing and regular people struggling to get by. Those streets, those accents, and that quiet strength later showed up in his songs with real place names and simple words that never asked for pity. His dad, Erwin, carried a heavier past. Born into a Hungarian Jewish family, he fled Budapest in 1939 when he was about 16, as laws against Jews got worse and Europe headed toward disaster. He arrived in Britain alone. The family he left behind faced the Holocaust while he tried to survive as a refugee with no country. In Glasgow and later in Blyth, his accent, his politics, and his Marxist and non-religious views kept him outside normal post-war British life. At home, he argued strongly about religion, power, war, and class, moving ideas around the table like chess pieces. He trusted thinking more than rules after seeing Europe fall apart. Years later, Mark turned that same questioning into songs that quietly doubt war and extreme patriotism without yelling. Home life was full of love, but never peaceful. Ideas clashed. Worries about money were always there. Louisa pushed school and music, believing they were the way up. Erwin pushed thinking and arguing, refusing simple answers. Mark watched his dad's beliefs bump against Britain's strict class system in the 1950s. He soaked up the tension between ideals and real life. That feeling later lived in his music in songs about regular guys stuck in big systems, sung without big drama or hero acts. Music really grabbed him after the move to Blyth. Around age 7, he watched his Uncle Kingsley play piano and bang out boogie-woogie rhythms while B lowing blues on a harmonica. Those sounds amazed him. He later said those simple 3 chords were the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. He didn't have a guitar, so he took a cheap tennis racket and pretended it was one, forming chords in the air, acting out a future he couldn't name yet, but already wanted. Around 1959, when he was about 10, his parents finally bought him a real guitar. It was a cheap Spanish-style one, nothing like the red Fender Stratocaster he dreamed of. He was left-handed, but learned on a right-handed guitar anyway, changing himself because he had to. The strings were high, the neck was thick, and his fingers hurt every day. There was no amp or extra stuff, so he played quietly with bare fingers instead of a pick. His thumb and fingers learned to move on their own. What felt like a limit quietly became his special sound. That soft finger style later became the one everyone recognized right away. Teen years in Blythe and Newcastle were tough. Being different made him stand out. School could be mean, so he stayed in his room with the guitar. Late at night, he listened close to a small radio, pausing and restarting songs to learn Beatles lyrics, Bob Dylan chords, and Chicago blues notes. He joined school bands in the 1960s, trying skiffle, folk, and early rock. But the real practice happened alone. Obsession mixed with feeling lonely. His bedroom turned into his own music school long before anyone noticed. Fear of not having money followed him. He had seen his dad struggle to find work his whole life. One missed bill could ruin everything. That worry sank in deep. Years later, it came out in Sultans of Swing, written in the mid-1970s and released in 1978, about small pub bands playing for almost no money while life goes on. In 1970, around age 20, he studied English at the University of Leeds and graduated in 1973. While others planned safe jobs, he spent nights in small clubs around Leeds and Yorkshire, playing folk and blues with Steve Phillips as the Duolian string pickers. The rows? Misses were smoky, the crowds small, maybe 30 people. Pay was a few pounds and free drinks. He was slowly building the style that would later make him famous, without taking shortcuts. In April 1970, he recorded a simple home demo called Summer's Coming My Way. His degree was in English, but his heart had already picked music. After graduating, he took a job teaching English at Loughton College in Essex in 1973. It was just to survive, not his dream. By day, he taught. By night, he played in London's pub rock scene with bands like Brewer's Droop and later Cafe Racers. He carried gear into vans and did low-paid shows. His teaching pay bought a motorbike, helped fix his dad's car, and got more guitars. That double life went through the mid-1970s and quietly prepared him for what was next. Brewer's Droop was a struggling pub band when he joined in 1973. They played rough venues, faced rowdy crowds, and chased jobs that hardly paid. Recordings he made with them stayed unreleased until 1989, hidden for about 16 years. In June 1977, Mark Knopfler was 27 and barely getting by in southeast London. He lived in a run-down council flat in Deptford, surviving on small teaching jobs and some journalism while playing pub gigs at night. London felt noisy, crowded, expensive, and most days he counted coins. Still, that summer, something changed. He put together a band with his younger brother David on rhythm guitar, John Ilsley on bass, who had a day job as a social worker, and Pick Withers on drums, a jazz-style player who had done real studio work. They practiced wherever they could fit. Tiny flats, mattresses against walls, extension cords across the floor, a few old amps shared because no one could buy more. Sometimes Mark walked miles across the city with his guitar in a soft case just to save bus fare. It was uncomfortable, sweaty, and unsure. Yet, within a year, songs made in those tight rooms would be heard on stages worldwide. They didn't even have a band name at first. One night, a friend heard them worry about unpaid rent and empty pockets, and joked that they were in dire straits. The Brothers in Arms tour ran from 1985 into 1986 and beyond, with roughly 230 to 247 shows in about 100 cities, playing to around 7.1 million people. Mark did 3-hour shows night after night. His hands hurt, tendons and nerves swollen. He iced them in hotel rooms just to keep playing. At home, his marriage suffered. His twin sons, born in 1987, mostly saw him on TV. In 1991, Mark Knopfler started the next Dire Straits chapter, feeling heavy. On Every Street was supposed to be the big follow-up to Brothers in Arms, the record that sold 30 million copies. That huge number was always there, even if no one said it. So when recording started in early 1990, it wasn't just about making songs. It was about trying to match a moment that was already legendary. And this is where Mark's need for perfection stopped helping and started hurting. He kept throwing out parts. He kept rewriting. A bar here, a chord there, a line that didn't feel right. A take that was good but not perfect. So the band kept going back to the studio. Weeks became months. The release kept getting pushed back. Meanwhile, money kept getting spent like a slow fire. When the album finally came out, it didn't fail. It sold a solid 5 to 5.3 million copies worldwide. That's huge for most artists, but it felt small next to 30 million. Expectations can make a success feel like a loss. Still, in places like France, the label went all in. They shipped 300,000 units before release. The record started at number 1. Then it passed 1.2 million copies and earned diamond status. On paper, it looked great. But then the feeling changed. Sales slowed later. Critics and fans said it didn't hit like the 1979 to 1985 years. Even Mark later said he could feel deep down that the era was ending while he was still trying to perfect every note. Then came the tour, and once it started, there was no slow pace. From August 1991 to October 1992, Dire Straits did roughly 216 concerts across Europe, North America, and Australia. About 7.1 million tickets were sold. That kind of number looks like glory from far away. Up close, it can feel like a trap. The band on stage wasn't even the same as the early days. Rhythm guitarist Phil Palmer replaced original member David Knopfler. The live group grew into a big touring machine. Night after night, they did long shows with stretched versions of Telegraph Road, Sultans of Swing, and new songs. It was smooth, it was strong. It was also tiring. Some weeks had 4 or 5 arena shows in 1 week. Travel days didn't feel like rest. They felt like more work in airports, buses, and hotels. And sooner or later, the body makes you pay. Late in the tour in Milan, tiredness really hit Mark in a way he couldn't ignore. He got so dehydrated and worn out that he needed IV fluids backstage. Several shows had to be canceled. That was the harsh truth showing through the shiny surface. It showed how close everything was to falling apart physically. People on the tour later called it 14 months on a conveyor belt. like life was a moving line, and you couldn't get off. And all the while, the music that sounded so open and clean on record was hiding stress underneath. Years earlier, original drummer Pick Withers had already left, after 1982's Love Over Gold. He described Mark's very careful studio style and long practices as controlling. To him, it didn't fit. His style was more jazz. Mark's was tighter. That difference wasn't small. It was the kind that slowly breaks a band's connection. By the time On Every Street came, the old core was gone. Withers never returned. David Knopfler had left back during the tough making movies sessions in 1980. The rhythm section was session pros instead of the friends who made songs in small rooms in Deptford in the late 1970s. The touring band could play the parts perfectly, but some critics and fans said it felt too perfect, less exciting, less alive, like Mark Knopfler plus a pro backing band, not a real group moving as one. That quiet change mattered. It pushed them closer to the end, even with huge crowds. When the tour finally ended in late 1992, Mark was done in a way that had nothing to do with sales. He was physically exhausted, mentally worn out. He put Dire Straits on break instead of saying it was over. But inside, he never wanted to go back to the arena life. And there was another quiet thing running alongside all this. The quiet between brothers. David had quit in 1980, and the relationship never really healed. Over the years, interviews showed how little they talked since the early 1990s. There were hurt feelings about writing songs, credit, control, and what it felt like to leave just as success got huge. Fans kept hoping for them to make up and do a proper goodbye. But time pulls people apart. Mark built one life, David built another. The distance stayed, and it lasted over 3 decades. In 1995, Dire Straits officially broke up after 6 studio albums, even though they were still one of the biggest-selling rock bands ever with tens of millions of records sold worldwide. That is what surprises people. Most bands would jump at another tour to feel that rush again. But Mark kept walking away. Promoters kept offering. Deals got bigger. Bassist John Illsley has talked about the reunion money as huge, with 8-figure offers for a world tour built around Money for Nothing and Brothers in Arms. Illsley said every time he saw Mark's manager, there was another giant offer. Yet Mark kept saying no. He said he was happier doing smaller solo tours, writing, and working his own way. For him, it wasn't about old memories. It was about staying sane. It was about creative freedom. It was about never getting stuck in that high-pressure world again. So instead of going back to stadium rock, he changed his whole life in front of everyone. On March 25, 1996, he released his first solo studio album, Golden Heart. It came 8 years after Dire Straits' last studio record, On Every Street, in 1991. And 1 year after the band officially ended in 1995, the path was clear. Smaller venues, different sounds, a studio team built around Guy Fletcher, and a mix of Nashville and Irish players. The sound moved toward British folk, Celtic feels, and country swing. Quieter, more personal. The album was 71 minutes with 14 tracks. It hit the UK top 10, and that solo road became a long second chapter with 5 studio albums released between 1996 and 2007, later put together as a box set in 2021, like a clear line between who he was before and who he chose to be. Even earlier, Mark had started building another side of himself. Back in 1983, he took the job to score Local Hero before Dire Straits even released Brothers in Arms. That timing matters because it shows his thinking. He was writing music for a small Scottish comedy long before he was a stadium star. The schedule was tight. He wrote and recorded dozens of short pieces in just weeks to match exact scenes, the kind of work that teaches discipline. And then something surprising happened. The closing theme, Going Home, built on a simple guitar idea, got a life of its own. It became the song played before games at Newcastle United's St. James's Park. Tens of thousands of fans have heard it loud through speakers for years. A little 1983 movie tune became one of Britain's most known instrumental pieces. Then, in 1987, with The Princess Bride, he went even more his own way. Director Rob Reiner wanted a big orchestral adventure sound. Mark said no. Instead, he built the score around a synclavier, an expensive digital synthesizer, adding acoustic guitars and a few live instruments. Much of the music was made inside that one machine. Mark would improvise while watching scenes. Guy Fletcher would rush to write down quick changes in harmony and rhythm in real time. And hidden in that world was Storybook Love, written and sung by Willie DeVille, produced and fitted into the score by Mark Am. It got an Academy Award nomination in 1988, but lost to I've Had the Time of My Life from Dirty Dancing. Still, the melody lives on and is still used in live orchestral Princess Bride shows decades later. By the time Sailing to Philadelphia came out on September 26, 2000, Mark's solo world had grown bigger. It was his second solo studio album and his most team-up one with guest singers like James Taylor, Van Morrison, and others. It was a 13-track set full of American roads, radio preachers, and surveyors. The title song came from Thomas Pynchon's 1997 novel Mason Dixon, not the kind of book most rock stars use. The album did well across Europe. It went multi-platinum in places like Norway and Denmark, and platinum in the UK. By 2002, it had sold well over 1 million copies worldwide. Yet, even with that, Mark didn't treat the songs like old hits. He kept changing them. He kept stretching pieces like Speedway at Nazareth into long live versions, sometimes over 7 minutes, turning a studio song into a slow, powerful ending on tours in 2001 and 2002. Then came the moment that could have ended it all. In March 2003, he crashed his motorbike on Grosvenor Road in Belgravia, London. He broke his collarbone, shoulder blade, and 7 ribs. Planned tours were cancelled for about 7 months. He had to stay off the guitar and do physical therapy. It was a forced stop, the kind that makes you look at your hands and wonder if the thing you built your life on can be gone in one morning. But even after that, he didn't rush back to the loud old life. In February 2004, he went to Shangri-La Studios in Malibu to record a low-key album called Shangri-La. The place itself had history with names like The Band, Bob Dylan, and Neil Young. The record was about 56 minutes and came out later in 2004. And one of its standout songs, Boom Like That, was based on Ray Kroc's autobiography. After more than 25 years in music and after a near-fatal crash, he was still ready to write a single about obscure business history instead of safe love songs. That shows exactly what kind of artist he is when no one is making him do anything else. And in his personal life, the pattern stayed the same. Big changes, quiet goodbyes, no drama. In March 1972, he married his school days girlfriend, Kathy White, while studying English at the University of Leeds, back when he was still working as a journalist and playing local pubs for small money. By 1973, graduation and moving to London created distance. Friends later said the split happened sometime between 1973 and the mid-1970s with no scandal, no court fights, no headlines, just two people drifting apart while one chased a risky dream. The feeling from that choice showed up in early Dire Straits songs about loneliness, cheap rentals, and city wandering. In November 1983, he married Lourdes Salomon, a London music executive, just weeks after Dire Straits finished the long Love Over Gold tour cycle and headed into the pressure that led to Brothers in Arms. In March 1987, at the height of worldwide fame, they welcomed twin sons, Benji and Joseph, while the band was still on the tour that started in 1985. Success brought comfort, but it also kept him away for months. By 1992 to 1993, as Dire Straits slowed and he moved toward film scores and quieter work, the marriage ended in divorce after about a decade. That split pushed him even more toward a low-key life. Then, on February 14, 1997, at age 47, he married British actress and writer Kitty Aldridge in Barbados. Their first daughter, Isabella, arrived in 1998. Their second daughter, Katya Ruby Rose, arrived on November 25, 2003, just months after the crash. The picture here isn't flashy. It's steady. A quiet home in Chelsea, not a rock star mansion. Kitty moved from acting to writing novels. Mark built British Grove Studios in West London, choosing a routine where he could walk to work instead of disappearing on year-long tours. That marriage has now lasted over 2 decades, and it matches a full change from stadium singer to an older craftsman focused on tone, stories, and family calm. Even when the world tried to pull Dire Straits back on stage, he kept saying no. In December 2017, Dire Straits were announced as Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees for the 2018 class. The band had sold over 100 million albums worldwide. The ceremony was on April 14, 2018, in Cleveland. It should have been a big reunion chance. It wasn't. Mark didn't go. There was no speech, no introduction, and no performance, making it the first act in Hall history to accept with no introduction and no playing. Only John Illsley, Alan Clark, and Guy Fletcher took the honor. Illsley later said Mark just didn't want a reunion, and there was no point playing without him. And that was it. The absence became part of the story. Then, in his later career, Mark kept doing what he always did. Quiet work, careful choices, numbers that matter but not tied to stadium stress. In April 2024, at age 74, he released his 10th solo album, One Deep River, recorded at British Grove Studios in London. The standard edition had 12 songs and came out on April 11, 2024. The tracks came from memories of the River Tyne. In the same year, he auctioned over 120 guitars and amps for $884 million at Christie's. At least 25% of that money went to charities, including the British Red Cross, Tusk, Brave Hearts of the Northeast, and Teenage Cancer Trust. No reunion tour, no stadium run, just steady work and charity giving that was clear and real.